Okay, we're going to go ahead with HB 1646, the first bill on the hearing for the Education Committee this morning. This is a bill relative to charter public schools. And the prime sponsor of this bill is Representative Luno. We got a card. That's great. That's already got that. I've got it already. So I take one for one.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Dave Luno, representing the people of Hopkinton Bow and folks all across our great state. And I'm here to introduce House Bill 1646. When I put the bill in, it was basically designed to add really a hard floor to what I would say would be the most basic of standards for our public charter schools, that those schools would be private corporations incorporated under the laws of New Hampshire and shall operate, in fact, the existing language says secular organization, and I added 501c3 corporation. Everything else in here is the same, except we did add the word secular to one other area in statute where it was inadvertently absent, and legislative services did all the drafting on this. But I don't want to focus so much on the current language. Like I said, really sort of minor changes on this. But shortly after I filed it, and as the bill text became public, or not, maybe not necessarily public, but went to departments for fiscal analysis and comments, I did receive a call from Ms. Davis over at the Department of Ed saying that she has for the last several months been involved in conversations with the Department of Justice relative to minimum standards for charter school approval, and that they were hoping to find a bill that could be amended for the recommendations that they were working on. And I said, well, look, Caitlin, I'd be more than delighted, more than happy to work with you and the Department of Ed and the Department of Justice on any sort of suggested changes you have on this, and happy to use this as a vehicle for that. So just yesterday, and this is an email that I've just passed around the room. Actually, Representative Cordelli, you feel, the email actually came to Representative Cordelli and to me. So and I hope Representative Cordelli's had a chance to give it a look-see.
Yes.
That Ms. Davis would like to have the opportunity to use 1646 as a vehicle for standards. In her email, she uses the word retain. I believe what she means there, because we don't retain bills in the second year, and interim study doesn't even further their interest to make statutory changes. I think she means amend in this. That's certainly what she indicated to me when we spoke earlier this winter on this. I have not seen what the recommendations from the Department of Ed or the Department of Justice are when it comes to minimum standards or revised minimum standards for charter school approval, and it may be related to some recent events that the Department of Education and Department of Justice are working from, but I guess, we're obviously, not executing bills today. I don't believe this is, well, it's certainly not an early bill because we wrapped those up yesterday. So we've got some time, I think, to address this, and would appreciate the committee's indulgence in working with the Departments of Education and Justice on any necessary changes that they feel should be made to the framework for charter school approval. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions, but really, I think I think it would even make more sense to save questions from when we hear more from DOE and DOJ.
I do have one question for you, just getting some clarification here. You're modifying the definition for charter public school under Roman 4 and 194B1. And there, if you went down to Roman 5 in that same section of law, you see a definition for the charter conversion school, which is a charter that is a result of a local board and community decision.
Correct.
It could go further sometime down the road in years, and that charter conversion school could become a charter public school.
Correct.
So in any way, does this language right here impact the nature of a charter conversion school?
I believe it does. And a charter conversion school, if my memory serves me, is a locally chartered
It's a local
charter school.
designed by the school board,
Right, not the state board.
not the state board.
Correct.
And the funding comes to that charter conversion school the way it does previously to the school board from the state.
Right.
However, there's different, 80% and all that within the definition.
Right. And the direct grants from the state are different for charter conversions than they are for state board approved charter schools. My understanding is that this touches on both of those because that was at the crux of the conversation that I had with legislative services during drafting, and that's why they spent the time to do the drafting on this. I don't know to what extent the Departments of Education and Justice would see that the minimum standards for charter conversion schools would be different than state board chartered charter schools, but clearly those are two very different organizations because one of them reports up through the locally elected school board and has that school board is fiscally fiduciary, acting as a fiduciary responsible for that charter school and obviously the taxpayers that support it, where a state board charter school does not have that same line of governance.
Yeah. Just one
to it.
follow up to that. I just trying to eliminate any possible conflict or confusion here. We're in the amendment on line 3 in the bill. It says charter public school is a private corporation, comma.
Yeah.
Then under 5, Roman 5, it says a charter conversion school means a public school. Is there any confusion here resulting from the language where one place we're saying a charter is a public school is a private corporation, but here we're saying that a charter conversion school is a public school?
I don't think so, and I don't have the law book in front of me, but Roman 4, I believe, is directed to charter schools that are chartered by the state board. Roman 5, and it does touch on Roman 5 down in section 3. And in section 4.
In section 3.
And in section 4. And like I said, that's where legislative services felt they needed to make sure that there was clarity.
Thank you. Representative Cordelli?
Thank you. Thank you, Representative. Yeah, I did receive that letter, and I have talked with Ms. Davis several times in the past month or so about the issue, and they have been working on really a rewrite of the charter school chapter of law, because it is has gotten a little bit confusing between locally chartered schools and state chartered schools. So they've been trying to do a complete rewrite, and we did talk about this as being a vehicle for that. But last time I talked with them, they were not ready for introduction of any amendment. And it's my impression that they might not be ready until next year. And so I think maybe that's what she was addressing with the retained comment in the letter. But I had sent her a note about getting together on other topics. So I will follow up with her to see if they have any hope of any language being ready by the time that we need to get a bill out in March.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Representative Cordell. I'll follow up with Ms. Davis on it, on this as well. Obviously, if they're thinking next year, it would just be submitted as a new bill, so you wouldn't have to interim study, retain, or anything on this. It would be not used as a vehicle at all. But if between if the Departments of Education and Justice have some immediate changes that they feel need to be put in place, particularly in light of recent bankruptcies and insolvencies at Seacoast. Seacoast did receive, I think, almost $1.5 million in the charter startup grant, charter and expansion grant. So at least from what I've read in the newspaper, there's allegations of fraud and financial misuse in that. So where that $1.5 million wound up, I don't know, and I think it may be something that the Department of Justice and the Department of Education do want to get a better handle on. Obviously, we just passed a bill on the House floor that would open the door for charter schools to participate in the school building aid program. Those are also public monies, and should school building aid go to a charter that then subsequently becomes insolvent, we need to make sure we understand what happened to that money. We need to understand any obligations that the charter may have in terms of liquidating assets or whatever assets that do remain to accrue to what organizations benefit, and that we're not that we don't have loopholes in there for fraud and corruption. I think that's why the Department of Justice is so interested in this bill.
Yes, we talked about disillusionment earlier this year. Representative Belcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. Of course, I don't have any amendments, so I'm just going to look at the bill as is. And despite being a relatively short bill, it seems to me like it does a lot. And without digging into a lot, because we don't need to do that right this minute, I'd just like to look at one or two things real quick, especially starting under Roman 4. Part of the change here is that the organization must be incorporated under the laws of New Hampshire. That strikes me as something we previously learned about in a different bill. What we learned was that it can potentially take time, a year, perhaps longer, for an organization that might be organized out of state to reorganize in state. So do you know how many, if any, current existing charter schools would be disqualified under that change?
So thank you for the question. My understanding is that current law does require our charters to be incorporated in New Hampshire. That's different than what is in other states. It just doesn't happen to be in this section. It's somewhere else. So my understanding is that it would not change any of our existing charters or the practices that existing charters use to form in New Hampshire. However, and I don't mean to jump ahead and imply things in your question that weren't there, that the requirement to be a 501c3 at the time of establishment may need to be looked at again, because there may be other another IRS code that a charter gets established under. Ms. Davis's memo references that, but also says that that there's at least, I think she says that there's one where their current IRS status of not being a 501c3 is getting in their way of receiving a banknote or something like that. So I think there are some serious things that would need to be changed in the bill as presented. And that's why, waiting for some sort of feedback and guidance from DOJ and DOE, I think would be good.
Thank you.
Representative Lekis?
Thank you. Yes, it looks, she said it could be retained for a study committee, and whether that's amending it to an actual study committee or just keeping it for interim study, because she also says she wants to work on it through this summer. So but rather than just leaving DOE to work on it, if we did it as a group, then we would have input as well.
Absolutely open to if you wanted to turn this into a study committee or something like that. I think that's a perfectly good use for this bill.
Further questions? Representative Myler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a point of information. One of the reasons why we have successful charter schools in the state is because of the rigorous process that one goes through to get a charter. And it would seem to me that this kind of when you talk about the 501c3, that this could be part of that process. And as I understand it, at least somebody told me at one point in time, it takes anywhere from, once somebody decides they want to move forward with the charter, it takes anywhere from 18 months to 24 months to get one started. And that this process of the IRS regulations, et cetera, could be part, it may even be part of the process right now because of the rigorous nature of obtaining a charter in the state.
Are there any further questions of the Representative? Yes, Representative Dry?
Thank you. Thanks for taking my question. And this is just technical. In line 7, it says you're repealing RSA B3. Yeah, it's Roman numeral 3A is repealed. It's already repealed in the statutes and then reenacted. And I'm just wondering how you do that.
This is where legislative services came
That's
in
kind of what I
on
thought.
that. And
Okay,
I had noticed that as well. Thank you.
Are there further questions from Representative Luno? Not seeing. Thank you very
Great.
much.
Thank you very much.
Do we have anybody else here today that would like to speak to this particular bill? Not seeing. Thank you very much. And so we have no further cards, so we're going to close the hearing for 1646. And the next bill comes up at 10:45. We're ready to go ahead with the next bill. It is 10:45 by the clock in this time zone. HB 1087 is what we're looking at. This is a bill establishing a commission to study information literacy and media literacy instruction in public schools. And I welcome Representative Page.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nice to see you all again. All right, in 2016, Stanford University's History Education Group conducted a study on youth media literacy skills in the United States. This was their headline conclusion. Young people's ability to reason about information on the internet can be summed up in one word: bleak. In a more recent study of 100,000 students conducted by the nonprofit News Literacy Project, approximately 4 in 10 students could not recognize that a meme about genetically modified organisms did not contain strong evidence for an accompanying false claim about their safety. In study after study, we're finding that our students are not adequately equipped for navigating information in our 21st century world. So now for the good news. In the years since the Stanford study was first published, more and more states have risen to the challenge of closing this media literacy skills gap. 20 states have now passed legislation focused on improving student skills in this area, giving New Hampshire abundant and varied models to consider, evaluate, learn from, and adapt to our local needs. New Hampshire can and should add our name to the list of states that are committed to equipping our students with the necessary skills to navigate today's complex media landscape responsibly and critically, which is why I'm here today introducing HB 1087. Students' media and information literacy abilities are not only essential workforce skills, they're also foundational to their duties as responsible citizens and critical factors in their health and well-being. The National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine just last year in December recommended in their report on social media and adolescent health that media literacy education currently suffers from scarce funding, uneven content, poorly qualified instructors, and a lack of reference standard. All 4 of these issues should be addressed. It goes on further to note that teachers are important ambassadors in educating and continually mentoring young people on how to address and remain aware of new technological trends, and as such, need to be educated themselves, initially and on an ongoing basis, on effective ways to teach media literacy. So in other words, it's not just the students, it's also ensuring that our educators are equipped to provide this instruction. Last year, the U.S. Surgeon General's advisory on social media and youth mental health also explicitly recommended that policymakers support the development, implementation, and evaluation of digital and media literacy curricula in schools and within academic standards. They continue, digital and media literacy provides children and educators with digital skills to strengthen digital resilience or the ability to recognize, manage, and recover from online risks such as cyberbullying, online harassment and abuse, and excessive social media use. So more good news, New Hampshire's taken a first step here. So in response to the Surgeon General's findings last year, our governor issued an executive order directing a statewide response to the impact of social media on children in New Hampshire. And this was an absolutely critical first step, which I applaud. And in seeking to create this commission today, we're aiming to build upon that foundation with additional research that can light the path to improving student learning outcomes in this area. The proposed duties of this commission encompass a comprehensive review and evaluation of media literacy instruction in our schools. Specifically, the commission will review our standards, assess the availability of resources and training for educators, examine best practices for integrating information media literacy instruction across different subjects and grade levels, identify the challenges and barriers to effective instruction, evaluate the state of our school library programs here in the Granite State, analyze those efforts that these 20 other states have taken, and ultimately develop recommendations for legislative action. So while some states like California, New Jersey have passed very ambitious and comprehensive legislation in this area, what is proposed today is just a modest first step and a go slow approach so we can figure out what will work for us here in New Hampshire. It follows in the footsteps of other states, including Washington and Connecticut, that began this process in the same way, tackling this issue first with a commitment to deep study and exploration, which frankly is what information literacy is all about, taking our time, making sure we do it right, doing our research. So before I close, I'd like to direct your attention to some of the testimony submitted online, which I hope you'll review in full, but I just want to pull out a couple quick quotes from some of the organizations supporting this commission. In their testimony in support of the bill, the New Hampshire School Library Media Association notes, school librarians have been central to preparing media literate citizens for decades, promoting the kind of critical thinking necessary to locate, evaluate, and effectively use information. We support New Hampshire's efforts toward making information and media literacy accessible for students across the state. And then Aaron McNeil, CEO and founder of the advocacy group Media Literacy Now, writes, people across the country are becoming alarmed at the way children are targeted by media messages, especially in social media. Manipulative messages and information of all kinds created by individuals, governments, and other groups represent a great challenge. Protecting our citizens from manipulation and exploitation must include media literacy education for children. AI-generated information and messages are adding to the challenge and the urgency. Media literacy education is also key to our innovation and information economy. We need a population empowered to participate, to engage creatively, and to make decisions for themselves, their families, their employers, and as citizens. Media literacy is an issue on which we have seen bipartisan agreement across the country. So in closing, I, along with these other organizations, urge you to support this bill for the benefit of our kids and for the future of the Granite State. And I'd be happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Representative Cordelli.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Page. And I think I would agree with you on a number of points, including the fact that there are groups targeting our youth. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that there is a lawsuit that has been filed against Facebook and a couple of other social media sites, and in terms of affecting the mental health of students. How might that play into this commission's work, if at all?
Sure. Thank you for the question. I'm not certain of the specifics of that lawsuit, so I don't feel like I can speak to that specifically. But I would certainly say, regardless of the outcome of that suit, what I would hope this commission would explore is how to ensure that children are equipped when they receive these problematic messages to be able to decode them, to understand what the underlying motives of the messenger are, and to be able to, be more informed as they're trying to make their choices in response to those messages.
Thank you. Representative Myler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. Representative Page, you obviously have an interest in this topic. Could you, for the committee, outline your professional background as it relates to literacy, books, etc.?
Sure. Yeah. So my professional career has actually been in publishing, but I spent about 10 years of that career developing social studies curriculum materials. So that's where I began. And then I moved on to develop library and information science materials for the next 10 years of my career. So I've been rooted in the education field for 20 years of my career with a focus on social studies and on libraries.
Thank you.
Further questions from the committee? Representative Belcher?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. So within the bill, within the proposed commission, it specifically implicates the organization Youth Activism Project. I'm sorry, not youth, Media Power Youth.
Yep.
So I've looked at I've looked at them a little bit to see what they're all about, and because they're obviously would be a major part of this if they're on the commission. They identify, I can see three major core competencies to what they're calling digital media literacy. Competency number one focuses on mental health around transformative social emotional learning. Number two is identifying disinformation through teaching children what sources are or are not trustworthy. Number three is digital activism, which they undertake through their partnership with Boston Children's Hospital, and they particularly highlight their LGBTQ plus advocacy with Boston Children's Hospital. So my question, based on what I've just seen here and what I've just said, is in a divided culture, how is this going to help as opposed to harm the division that is already existing about what is going on in public schools?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Representative. I'd say a few things. One is this is one member of a commission. Number two is I don't think that there are a lot of different information literacy models out there. That three-pronged model you've just described is one organization's approach, although there's continuity with many other models. The executive director of that organization is here and might be better positioned to answer some of those questions more directly. I would also, I think that's all. I had another point, but I've already lost it. And if it occurs to me, I'll bring it back.
Representative Page, I do have one question.
Yep.
Then Representative Woodcock. Within our statutes currently, we have set that we want to integrate logic and rhetoric into these learning areas, which we identify as adequacy.
Yep.
And yeah, I'm not going to touch so much on the rhetoric, which is written in oral communication, but on the other side, in the area of logic, we're talking about students being able to understand cause and effect, being able to discern fact from nonfiction, and get into good, strong thinking skills. Do you believe it's best to integrate what you're trying to do here and provide more professional development for our teachers to know how to integrate logic into all these subject areas, seeing that the social media is in social studies and within the 5 areas of social studies and all the other subjects we have?
Thank you. That is such a great question. I would say, first of all, that's a question that this commission should explore. I suspect what the commission will find is much in line with what you're saying, which is that these skills need to be embedded throughout the K-12 curriculum and throughout all subject areas. I certainly know of some schools where this is taught as sort of in a specific unit of instruction, but I think that one and done approach is probably not the best approach, and that we really need this instruction embedded throughout. And one of the specific areas of exploration that this commission would be charged with is that question of what professional development our educators need in order to be able to teach our children these skills effectively. So that would be one of the key questions we'd be investigating.
Thank you.
If I may, I recalled what I was going to answer Representative Belcher's question. I just wanted to add regarding Media Power Youth that they are the only New Hampshire organization specifically dedicated to working on this issue, and they have also been tapped previously by the state of New Hampshire for collaboration. For example, when Governor Sununu issued this executive order, they were part of the team that worked with the state of New Hampshire on developing that curriculum. So they have been tapped in that way before.
Thank you very much. Are there further questions, Representative Dry? Oh, excuse me, Representative Woodcock. No, you're on deck. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, Representative Page. Good to see you again. I'm looking at the timeline.
Yep.
Particularly a fast timeline. So is it your anticipation then that if this bill comes from here and goes to the floor and is passed, that this commission will be doing their work this summer in preparation for November? Is that a reasonable timeframe?
I personally think it's reasonable when I imagine sitting on that commission. Not that I'm going to necessarily be appointed to the commission, but I think that I'm flexible on that. If this committee is interested in the idea but wants to discuss a different timeline, I'm certainly open to that.
I think it's excellent, the fact that you're trying to expedite it and that you brought it forward, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Representative Dry, thank you. Representative Dry?
Thank you. Thanks for taking my question. I guess I'm feeling kind of left out because if this is going to talk about proposals for legislation about instruction in New Hampshire schools, we're not on the list that gets the commission report.
Well, let's put you on there. I'm happy to do that. Yes. And put you on there by name even if you would like, Representative Dry. Yeah.
Are there further questions for Representative Page? Yes, Representative Cordial?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here and taking my question. It's a quick one, actually. As I was busy taking notes and all, I heard a phrase, digital resilience, I think you used. Could you just explain what that means a little bit more? Maybe I missed something or.
Sure. Yeah, that was a phrase that was used specifically by the U.S. Surgeon General in their advisory report. I can't say with certainty what the U.S. Surgeon General intended in using that phrase, but my interpretation of that would be, how to essentially how to move on from hostility that we encounter on social media day to day, how to be able to not internalize that and preserve your mental health in response to this kind of conduct that we probably all have encountered on social media.
Thank you very much. Not seeing any other hands. Thank you very much. And
Thank you.
we'll welcome our next speaker, Pam Harlan from Plymouth State University. Maybe help us out with a little of this professional development.
Yes, I hope so. Good morning. It's nice to see all of your faces, and I'm happy to be here. My name is Pam Harland, and I am a professor of education at Plymouth State University. I focus my work on preparing school librarians to do their work. I'm here to lend my support to the bill proposing the establishment of this commission. As educators, we have a profound responsibility to equip our students with the skills they need to thrive in this 21st century. Now more than ever, this includes fostering information media literacy skills. I'd like to present 3 reasons why investing in this area is crucial for our state's future. First, enhancing information and media literacy instruction strengthens the very foundation of our democracy and promotes civic engagement. In our increasingly digital world, the ability to critically evaluate sources, know the difference between a phishing attempt and a legitimate email, discern misinformation, including information generated by artificial intelligence, and engage with diverse viewpoints is paramount for informed citizenship. By instilling these skills in our students, we are nurturing the next generation of active and informed participants in our democratic process. Second, improved information literacy directly correlates with economic competitiveness and workforce preparedness. And let me know if you'd like to see all of the evidence that supports this claim. I have a lot of references. Employers across industries are seeking individuals who can navigate the vast area of information available online, make informed decisions, and effectively communicate their ideas using a variety of digital information tools. By prioritizing information literacy education, we're ensuring that our students are equipped to succeed in this global economy and bolster New Hampshire's economic prosperity. Lastly, investing in information literacy is an essential step in protecting against the harmful effects of misinformation and polarization in our society. In a time where misinformation can spread rapidly through social media, artificial intelligence, and online platforms, teaching our students how to critically evaluate information and recognize bias is an imperative for fostering a more informed and united community. By promoting information literacy in our schools, we're taking proactive measures to safeguard the integrity of public discourse and uphold the values of independent thinking that are central to our state's identity. In closing, I urge you to consider the profound impact that a commission dedicated to studying information and media literacy could have on the future of our state. By working together across party lines, we can ensure that all New Hampshire students are equipped with the skills they need to thrive in an increasingly complex and interconnected world. Thank you for your time and for your commitment to the students of New Hampshire.
Thank you. Are there questions from the committee? Yes, Representative Cordelli?
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Thank you.
You and the previous speaker both mentioned misinformation and fostering out misinformation. I believe that there have been several government initiatives to have bureaus, agencies possibly set up to identify misinformation. Just wondering your thought on government involvement in identifying misinformation.
I mean, personally, that feels frightening to me, that could possibly be something controlled by the government and could lead to more political division. Yeah, I feel like instilling these critical thinking skills in our students across the curriculum, across grade levels, K through 12, if we can do that consistently in our schools, hopefully by the end of that time, our students come out and they're able to think critically about the information that they're receiving. They're able to decipher what's misinformation, what's biased information.
Thank you very much. Representative Damon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. So I'm wondering if you could comment about what you are seeing in your Plymouth State students, what the range of their media literacy and critical thinking skills are now as they present to you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So to clarify, I teach graduate classes. So most of the candidates in my program who are my students are adults. Most of them are teachers, educators right now, and they are very interested in this topic, which is bringing them into the library media program at Plymouth State. They want to learn more so that they can integrate this into their curriculum. So many people are becoming certified library media specialists in order to do this work. A lot of my colleagues at Plymouth State, teaching undergrads especially, are concerned because as the students, as freshmen arrive, they have such a variety of skills, and it all depends on what school they went to as to how consistently they were taught these media literacy, information literacy skills. And that doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem fair. So Plymouth has definitely integrated this into the freshman experience so that freshmen are being taught how to do this on their own so that everybody's kind of on an equal playing ground as they arrive at Plymouth State as undergrads.
Representative Belcher?
A quick.
Thank you. That was helpful. Could you also just comment if you have seen a difference in, or your colleagues teaching undergrad, a difference in students' media literacy capabilities now, say, versus 10 years ago?
Yeah, I'm just not sure. I'm not sure. This is my 8th year at Plymouth State, and so I wasn't there during those times, so I just can't answer that, but I wish I could.
Representative Belcher?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony. I wanted to clear up with what seems like it might be to me a conflicting piece of information. You testified when you were asked about the government setting up this identification of disinformation. You said it would be scary and possibly dangerous. But this is referring to proposing legislation that will affect public schools, which are an arm of government, which would necessitate that arm of government deciding what is and is not disinformation. So can you speak to what that seems like a conflicting information?
Sure. This commission would not be deciding which resources were misinformation or disinformation, or working to like name specific publications to trust and what not to trust. It would be teaching teachers to teach students how to do that themselves, how to figure out themselves, how to evaluate and vet an especially online information source. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yes, it at least partway does, if I may,
Okay.
just to follow up on that. So because it does involve necessarily teaching media literacy to students at public schools, it does involve some degree of what is your first principles and what is your sort of foundational belief system when determining these things. So does that not get into an area that's going to become necessarily political?
I don't think so. I mean, we're not political in our program of teaching teachers. You know, we teach media literacy classes to graduate students. We teach media literacy classes to undergrads. And we're not political. We all come from different political backgrounds and ideologies. And there's nothing political about it. I mean, people have their own personal politics. But this is about teaching critical thinking and how to do that work yourself, rather than telling them this is the right answer or this is wrong. You're welcome.
Thank you. I do have a sort of a follow-up on one of the questions I asked earlier. Over the last year or so, we've had an opportunity to work with the provost, Nate from Botich from Plymouth State, and of course, Don Berkshire, president. And in looking at the issue of how we integrate higher order thinking skills into the teacher's repertoire as far as how to ask questions about what they're reading so they are starting to think on a higher level. And sometimes it takes a good 20 minutes to get to that level. But what are you doing right now? We've asked this when we were in the teacher shortage committee, asked the questions, what are the university and the college systems doing? I'm talking now, of course, you're Plymouth State is a wonderful teacher prep program. So is Keene. And UNH has a similar program. What are you doing within these programs right now to prepare these teachers, now even in the graduate level, those on the, the up end of the scale and who have been around for a while? How are you integrating these higher order thinking skills into their professional development?
So their professional development, if it involves taking classes at Plymouth State
Yes.
University, then certainly we're working on that. We have embedded a lot of these critical thinking skills into any assessments that we do. Their discussions are filled with these big questions that really get our candidates to think in complex and interconnected ways. That feels important. They're working together collaboratively to discern these different skills and to understand how to think critically about some of these topics. Yeah, I'm not sure if I answered your question. So you're asking specifically how we're teaching our graduate students, or you're asking me specifically how I'm teaching my graduate students to think critically. That's what you're asking.
Yeah, it's, I was a school administrator and I used to send a number of teachers to work with Dr. Ranzulli down at UConn dealing with gifted education.
Yeah,
And of course, there you have to get up to those levels.
I do.
And so a lot of that instruction down at UConn was how to ask the questions And I'm just curious to know whether we're doing that in the 3 teacher prep programs we have in this state. And you're in one of them, Plymouth State.
I am. And so we're definitely doing that in graduate level. We are teaching people inquiry skills. We're teaching them to ask these complex questions, to think deeply about topics. We're not talking superficial. I'm not teaching future librarians the Dewey Decimal System, right? We're teaching them some really
Well, it'd be good and they know that too.
right?
Yeah.
It would, but that's not the instruction. But like, why are we using the Dewey Decimal System? How does that help people keep information organized?
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Representative McDonald?
Thank you, and hi, how are you?
Good.
Please excuse me if this was addressed already. I was testifying in another committee, but I'm looking at the membership of this commission, and it is asking from the New Hampshire School Library Media Association, someone from an urban school and a rural school, and I am unaware of where these definitions are. What would be considered urban and what is rural? Is that defined somewhere else in statute, perhaps?
What? Yeah. Could David Page come up and answer this question?
So I'd be very open to adding a definition there. I'm also open to discussing the composition of the commission with the members of this committee if folks think that we need to look at that. So if we need definitions for rural and urban there, I'm fine with that. I'll tell you the underlying reason for doing that is in a lot of this discussion began trying to look toward what legislation might be right for New Hampshire. And what we quickly discovered, as a lot of us were talking through this, is that we have some real divides in terms of what would be realistic for different districts based on, I talked with one school librarian who was doing the most amazing work in her district, where she had, these amazing results. She did pre-assessments of the kids' skills, and it was really shocking, and did all this incredible work. And on the other end, the results are just incredible, right? In this one district. And it's something that, it makes you start salivating because you're like, oh, we need to scale this across, this is what we need. But then, you have somebody in an elementary school library on the same call in a different district who raises her hand and says, that's all great for you. I don't have a computer in my library, right? So we have this really important need, as we're discussing what the right solution might be for New Hampshire, that we get these perspectives from different grade levels that we'll need to be figuring out how we integrate this instruction in the curriculum, and also that rural-urban divide in the state. So that's where that comes from, but I'm very open to discussing with the committee if we want to either look at the composition itself more closely and discuss what might work, or also if we need stronger definitions there.
I
Does that help?
appreciate. And if I may have a follow-up?
Yes.
Thank you, Representative Page. Regarding the composition, the next section spells out the media power youth, and I'm always a little bit hesitant to put an organization name in statute. So I guess my question is why this organization was picked as opposed to perhaps another organization?
Sure. This came up briefly earlier in response to a question from Representative Belcher, but it's the only New Hampshire organization that focuses on this specific area, and that's the reason. If there were 20 of them, then I probably wouldn't name them, but they are the organization, the local organization that is doing this work and has worked on, Governor Sununu's prior initiative in this area, and so there's continuity there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we have several more cards here, and we do have to get out to lunch, and we have the governor speaking at 1 o'clock. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'd like to welcome Susan Ballard.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Susan D. Ballard, and I'm a resident of Manchester. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to you today about my earnest support for House Bill 1087, establishing a commission to study information literacy and media literacy instruction in public schools. I am a retired New Hampshire School District Director of Library Media and Technology, and a past president of the American Association of School Librarians. Most recently, I was part of a national project funded by the Institute of Museum and Library Services through the Laura Bush 21st Century Librarian Grant Program. I served as an interviewer and spoke with school administrators from across the country in discussing the impact of school librarians on student learning. I can assure you that this subject is top of mind among them. Like so many in New Hampshire, these school leaders are worried that learners are not developing the foundational skills and competencies needed to engage with and evaluate information resources in an increasingly complex and dynamic global environment. The overarching concern is that many of our young people are unable to distinguish fact from fiction, do not comprehend the difference between points of view and opinion versus accepted knowledge, or recognize misinformation, disinformation, and in the worst case scenario, malinformation designed to harm them, as well as impact societal interests. This all represents a compelling imperative to ensure that we prepare students for lifelong learning by equipping them with the ability to understand the research process and to recognize when there is a need for information problem solving, and then to locate, assess, and use information and resources ethically. I'm confident that the establishment of this commission will help to identify strategies that will pay dividends for our learning communities and contribute to ensuring that our students are not only information and media literate, but also productive citizens and involved and informed participants in the preservation of democracy. I urge you to move forward with creating the commission, and I thank you for your time and your thoughtful consideration of this bill.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from the committee? Representative Belcher.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. I had one question because I'm not honestly myself 100% clear on the distinction you brought up between what represents a opinion versus accepted knowledge. So could you provide that distinction for me?
Sure.
What is meant?
I would identify accepted knowledge as things like we know that the Earth revolves on an annual cycle. That's accepted knowledge versus someone who says, no, we're standing still. People are entitled to their opinion, but years of research, science, investigation have provided us with an accepted base of knowledge that I think most people would concur.
Yep.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Thank you very much. Further questions from the committee? Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have a copy of your?
I do.
Could you please submit that? We'll put it
Surely.
right into the record. Anybody else that had written communication too, we want to put that into the record as well. Yes, if you could
And
just
whom do I give?
hand it to Representative Belcher at the end there, and we'll put that into the record. That's very important. I'd like to invite Heather Ingert. Is that I-N-Y or G? Okay, thank you very much. Welcome.
Hello. Just
Yeah,
checking
works.
the mic. It works. Hello, Chairman and members of the Education Committee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts. My name is Heather Inyart. I am a New Hampshire parent and the leader of a nonprofit organization that teaches media literacy skills, Media Power Youth. Every day I meet young people who feel trapped in a media and tech ecosystem that simultaneously promises access to opportunity and at the same time threatens their safety and well-being. We owe it to the children of New Hampshire to teach them the skills they need to navigate these tools and prepare them for life after graduation. My comments today reflect my discussions with our Youth Advisory Board, local educators, and the researchers we've worked with to develop our media education programs. Much of the information children encounter each day is not from a book. Information is coming from students from all directions in a variety of formats. For example, they are learning about space exploration on a NASA live stream and getting homework help from peers on YouTube. They are learning about history through virtual reality experiences and reading the news on TikTok. If we value resourcefulness and curiosity in learning, we need to prepare our students for these journeys of discovery with the skills they to assess what they find. The information most students are interacting with is much more complex than just the written word. The texts our youth are confronted with feature movement, images, and sound woven together. Media and information literacy teaches the critical thinking skills that enable students to understand how each of these individual elements contribute to a message and to consider the source of the information when deciding what is and is not credible. Media literacy is not about telling students what to think. It is about helping them to build a toolkit of the literacy skills they need to read the complex information they encounter every day. It teaches students to ask appropriate questions of their heroes. I might love Tom Brady, but should I follow his advice about investing in crypto? We all saw how that turned out. The rapid development and integration of artificial intelligence into our communication tools and data systems makes it even more important that we teach our kids how to engage with information. These technologies make it cheap and easy for almost anyone to create fake information, including photos, conversational speech, and even someone's voice and likeness. I fully support this bill, HB 1087, to create a commission to study information and media literacy instruction in public schools. Media literacy is by its nature interdisciplinary and is often embedded in other subjects, including STEM, health, and language arts. The benefit of this commission is that we'll bring together a variety of perspectives and help us learn from others. It will help us understand what education efforts are already happening in New Hampshire and build on them by uncovering best practices in teaching, media and information literacy that can be shared across communities. As Representative Page noted, 20 states are already implementing media literacy initiatives in education, and if we don't consider this issue, we risk leaving New Hampshire's youth behind. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. We enjoy your Tom Brady comment. Six-time Super Bowl champion. Are there any questions from the committee? Representative Belcher?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you would be better answer this than Rep. Page because this is your organization. So I've perused the website a little bit, and it really identifies heavily a number of different pages on advocacy and activism and digital activism. I know one particular page talks about LGBTQ plus advocacy, your association with Boston Children's Hospital, but it's not just your organization. Even the Plymouth State website specifically identifies social change to be one of the goals of this program. So can you speak a little bit about how and why we would go about training students to be social activists?
So we have several different types of programming. Some of it is in schools in terms of teaching critical thinking, and that's curriculum. But we also work in part with other types of organizations after school or youth leadership groups that are not necessarily in schools. So I just want to clarify that element. When we talk about being active in issues that we care about, there is in education, project-based learning, and the theory of active involvement. And so when students are actively working on a project or creating something, and they have to make creative decisions about what information to include and not include, that's when the real learning happens. And so when we talk about these projects, it's often a particular topic maybe selected by an organization or selected by a group of students on something that they want to learn more about and explore. And we act as coaches for them to engage in necessarily in that topic. So to help them talk about issues in a way that brings people together and to be thinking through things like my audience, how am I building support for ideas, those types of skills. But that's a subset of what we do, usually at the request of a specific organization or individuals.
Thank you very much. Representative McDonald?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here as well as for what you have been doing across the state. My question is somewhat along the same lines what I had posed previously about spelling out media power youth in statute. Do you have any suggestions on possible amending language on how you could describe your organization without stating the name to leave it open-ended for future organizations that may arise?
I think for an organization that would have expertise in media literacy and that works specifically with young people, those would be ingredients that I think are would be important in any organization. Media Powered Youth was actually formed as part of a community health clinic. And so we always look at health and well-being as part of how we approach our work. So I think that's something that I would need to think a little bit more about and how exactly to describe it. But we have worked with many state agencies over the last 20 plus years on initiatives and are looking forward to help in any way that we can.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Further questions from the committee? Not seeing any more hands. Thank you very much for coming today. And we have no more pink cards on this one, so we're going to close the hearing on 1087 and open up the hearing on our next bill, which is 1418, relative to the use of education freedom account funds to purchase school uniforms. And I'm going to Is Representative Damon, are you a member, a sponsor of this bill? So he asked you to do it? Okay, that'd be fine. We'll have Representative Damon introduce it then. Is that the same letter that you had right there?
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. For the record, Representative Hope Damon, Sullivan District 8. I am here stepping in for Representative Horgan, who was not able to be here to introduce his bill. This is House Bill 1418, relative to the use of education freedom account funds to purchase school uniforms. And the bill analysis, the bill prohibits the use of EFA funds to purchase school uniforms. And I will efficiently read through Representative Horgan's remarks. HB 1418 deletes one line from RSA 194F2 Roman numeral 2, bullet point H, which specifies school uniforms as one of the items which can be bought with so-called EFA vouchers. The main rationale behind this bill is that it is unfair to use taxpayer funds to subsidize school uniforms when other school-related clothing expenses are excluded from the EFA program. Every school has a dress code of some sort. But when it comes to meeting the requirements of those dress codes, families are on their own unless they send their children to a very specific type of school. That would be religious schools such as Catholic parochial schools and Christian academies, as well as non-religious private schools. A secondary rationale is that it is unfair to exclude non-EFA families from this benefit. There are a few chartered public schools which require uniforms, although to the best of my knowledge, no regular public schools here in New Hampshire require them. As I've already said, all schools have a dress code of some sort. Neither the EFA program or the Education Tax Credit Program provide any assistance of any sort to public school families. It is hard to tell exactly how much taxpayer money is being spent on school uniforms, but it is a significant, though admittedly not huge amount. Halfway through the 22-23 school year, Education Commissioner Frank Edelblut compiled a rather vague report entitled, quote, EFA spending by spending category, unquote. A spending category called simply school uniforms amounted to $30,059 spread over 282 students. That amounts to 0.66% of the overall $4,568,620, which was spent over that applicable time period, apparently the second half of calendar year 22. This divides out to $106 per covered student. There were 4 other spending categories whose titles included the phrase school uniforms alongside other things. A second report covering the same period entitled EFA by vendor shows that the high-end online clothing store Land's End received $7,459 in EFA spending spread over 48 students. That averages out to $155.40 per covered student. Judging by what I have seen on Land's End website, their school uniform offerings are comparable to their regular merchandise, i.e. high quality, but not inexpensive. The overall cost of the EFA voucher program has continually increased by a massive amount since 2022, with no end in sight, and presumably school uniform spending has gone up along with all the other spending categories. I am not necessarily opposed to school uniforms per se, but I do not think they should be subsidized by the taxpayers. I know there are many families who can't afford uniforms, but their needs can be met by private charity or by the schools themselves. One way to meet those needs would be to privately subsidize purchases and gifts of new or used uniforms And another way would be to set up hand-me-down programs for children who lack older siblings. And that is Representative Horgan's testimony on his bill, HB 1418.
Thank you. Well, see,
I'm not
you're
taking
not taking
questions,
questions
but
because
let-
you're not Representative Horrigan.
Correct.
So with that, I have no other pink cards on this, so we're going to close the hearing down. All right. Do we have any kind of a caucus prior to this thing?
Yeah, 12 o'clock. Ooh, the Democrats too.
God, I didn't bring my lunch today.
Yeah.
I
it's
sure
already,
spent a lot of money at
snack.
Lansdowne, that's for sure, on those uniforms.
Where is it, in Repsalon?
Yeah,
I'm gonna just go out and get a sandwich and quickly.
yeah, right.
Yeah,
I'll see you over
yeah, yeah.
I'm sure we can.
But I
Oh, yeah, we'll get them there. Yeah.
And I do too, because actually,
They're good quality, I think
they're good quality.
that's why I buy so much Lansdowne clothing, is because it is a little more expensive, but